Good evening, everybody. Tonight's class is sponsored by Elisheva Green and family for the refuah shlema of their granddaughter, Rivka Rose Bashendel. Have a very speedily complete refuah.
Amen.
Amen.
Now, we're in the dinim of Muktzeh. We learned the various different types of Muktzeh. You know, certain Muktzeh you can move if you need the place or if you need to do it for something permissible. That is what's called Kli SheMelachto LeIsser, a vessel whose primary use is for something forbidden. So, but it's a keli, it's a utensil. So therefore, you can't move it for any reason, but you can move it if you need the place, or you want to use something, use it for something permissible. Like we explained, a hammer, let's say, its primary use is construction, which is forbidden, but you can crack open a nut, you can crack open a coconut with it, or if you need the place where the ladder is, then you'd be able to move it. There's certain types of muktzeh, whether it's a muktzeh by itself, muktzeh because we're afraid you're going to lose too much money if you use it. You're not going to use it for anything else but what its primary usage, or things that are just not considered utensils, or things that broke, or the various things that we learned throughout this time. So those are completely muktzeh, okay? Today we're going to discuss, okay, so things are muktzeh. Now, what does that mean? You can't touch it, you can't move it. Can you move it indirectly? So this is what we're going to be discussing tonight about the muktzeh. Now, there's something in, just to use the Hebrew terms of it, there's something called tiltul min hatzad. That means it's basically an indirect form of muktzeh. But I mean, moving it indirectly. To give you an example, I have a chair that has money on it, okay? And the chair, for whatever halachic reason, did not become a base for the money. Now I want to move the muktzeh. So I'm going to pick up the chair. I'm not directly touching the muktzeh. I'm not directly touching the money. The money is muktzeh, the chair isn't. So sometimes I'm allowed to pick up the chair and move the chair out of the way because I'm only indirectly touching the muktzeh. So then the din is like this. By the way, okay, let me just step back a second. Muktzeh is forbidden to move. Muktzeh is not forbidden to touch. Something which is muktzeh, you are allowed to touch. Something which is you're allowed to touch it. The only exception of that would be if by touching it, it would automatically move. For instance, there's a concept, an egg that was laid on Yom Tov or Shabbos. So that egg is forbidden to touch for the rest of Shabbos or the rest of Yom Tov. So by an egg, because it's round, when I touch it, it's automatically going to move. Or let's say you have a hanging chandelier, which is Kli SheMelachto LeIsser. Chandelier, we learned all electric things are bright vessels that are primarily used for forbidden things. By touching a hanging lamp, by touching it, it's going to move. So then I'm moving it, and that's forbidden. But let's say a stationary lamp on a table, I'm allowed to touch a lamp. I'm allowed to touch a radio. I'm allowed to touch a hammer. I'm allowed to touch a pen. I'm allowed to touch something which is completely muktzeh. Because the Chachamim, when they made the prohibition of muktzeh, the prohibition of muktzeh was not touching it, was moving. So therefore, muktzeh you could touch, but you can't move it. Now, if somebody, let's say, I'll give you an example. We were discussing in the previous classes, inedible peels or pits that are not edible are muktzeh. So what happens if I have a napkin and I peel an egg on top of the napkin? Okay, now, so the eggshells we learned are muktzeh. You can't play with them. The only time you would be allowed to pick it up if it would be a big mess on the table and it's not Shabbos day and you want to throw it out. We learned then the concept what's called geref shorei, meaning if it's a mess and it's not respectable for Shabbos, then I would be able to pick up the eggshells and throw them out. But what happens if I'm not going to touch the eggshells? The eggshells are going to be on a napkin, okay? And I'm picking up the napkin to throw out the eggshells because I need the place on the table. So then I would be allowed to take the napkin, and because I'm only indirectly using the muktzeh, I'm indirectly moving the muktzeh. If I'm indirectly moving the muktzeh, I'm allowed to move it if it's not for the benefit of the muktzeh itself. And I'll give you an example in a second. So indirect movement of muktzeh, now there's not directly with your hand, taking a hanger and moving muktzeh out of the way. So I'm not directly moving and touching the muktzeh. I'm only indirectly moving it. So the din is like this. If it's for the benefit of the muktzeh item, then I'm not allowed to. If it's not for the benefit of I'm moving it not for the muktzeh item, then I am allowed to. I'll give you an example. We mentioned before a case, and again, I just want to mention it if it's not a base. But what happens if there's money on a chair? If somebody left something muktzeh on a chair, and I want to move the chair. So if I'm moving the chair because I need the place where the chair is in the dining room, and I can't sit on the chair because there's money on the chair, and I need the place, or I just want to take the chair out of the way, then I'm allowed to pick up the chair and move it. Why? Because I'm only indirectly touching the muktzeh, the money, and I'm not doing it for the benefit of the money. What happens though, if I want to do it because I don't want the money to get stolen? Let's say I have a chair, something is with money on it outside, and again, if in the case where it's not a base of muktzeh, because then it would also be muktzeh. If I want to move it inside because I don't want the money to get stolen, then why am I moving it indirectly? I'm moving indirectly for the sake of the muktzeh. And then even indirect muktzeh, moving it with your hand indirectly would be forbidden. So let's say, to give you an example, we're discussing that if, let's say, you have stuff in the freezer, but in front of it, it's blocked by raw meat, raw chicken, raw fish. That's not edible. But raw, that's not cooked, right? And you can't cook it on Shabbat. So therefore, it would be muktzeh. So what happens? I'm stuck a case. There's chicken blocking the ice cream, and I want to get to the ice cream. So to take the chicken with my hand and move it, I wouldn't be allowed to, because that's called direct moving. I'm moving with my hand. That's the normal way you move things, with your hand. If I wanted to move it indirectly, then I'd be allowed to. Why? Let's say I want to take a hanger or something and push away the chicken to the other side of the freezer. If you have room, let's say, I'll take a hanger and push away the chicken to the other side of the room, of the freezer, because then I'm not pushing it away because of the muktzeh. I'm pushing it away because I want to get to the non-muktzeh. Then I would be allowed to move. I would be allowed to move the muktzeh indirectly, because I'm not doing it, moving it for the purpose of the benefit of the muktzeh. I'm doing it for the benefit of the non-muktzeh. Okay. Now, but if it's for the benefit of the muktzeh, we said it's not. Then it would be forbidden. Now, what happens? Okay, what happens if, and this is the case they give. Okay, you have a candy dish. It's full of candy. Okay, big dish full of candy. And somebody also let money on the and in the dish. Okay, so the dish is candy and money. Now money is muktzeh, but because the dish is a base for muktzeh money and non-muktzeh the candy, and right now the candy is more valuable than the muktzeh, than the money, so then you would be allowed to move the plate. So now, would I be allowed to take the plate and hand it around the table? Again, there's candy in the plate and there's money in the plate. Okay, so now I want to move the plate around. When it pass the plate around for everybody to say, take some candy. But indirectly, I'm moving the muktzeh. So then again, I would be allowed to do it. Because why am I moving the plate around? I'm not moving it for the money. I'm moving it because I want people to take the candy, which is not muktzeh. So in that case, I would be allowed to do it also. Or another case, can I take non-muktzeh off of muktzeh? So the answer is yes. Even if the muktzeh ends up shaking by it, let's say a little bit, but nevertheless, why am I taking it out? I'm not indirectly shaking the muktzeh for the benefit of the muktzeh. I'm shaking out, it might shake a little bit. Why? Because I want the non-muktzeh. I'll give you a very simple example, and this applies to men primarily. A guy has talus and tefillin bag. Okay, he has a tefillin bag, the big talus and tefillin bag. He has the tefillin in the bag, and he has the talus in the bag. And he needs to use that talus for Shabbos, but he forgot to take the talus out of the tefillin before Shabbos. Okay, so now he's allowed to open the bag, the zipper. He's allowed to take out the talus, even though he might be indirectly moving the tefillin with tefillin and muktzeh because you're not allowed to wear them on Shabbos. But then it's not a problem. Why isn't it a problem? Because again, why am I indirectly moving the muktzeh? I'm indirectly moving the muktzeh because for the non-muktzeh case. And then that would be allowed. Okay, now, what happens, and this is more common than we think it is. What happens if a kid is holding a stone, a rock, and the rock is muktzeh, but the kid wants to be held? Okay, halachically, you should wait until the kid drops the stone and then pick up the kid. Why? Because he's still carrying the muktzeh. What happens though if the kid it does it middle of the street? Okay, and or the kid is very dependent on the parent, and the kid is not going to throw the rock down, or so then the kid has a din of a sick person at that time, and then you'd be allowed to move. But not if he has money. If the kid is holding money, then you're not allowed to pick him up as long as he's holding the money. Why not? Because he might drop the money and then the parent will bend down to pick it up, forgetting it's Shabbos. Our stone, a pebble or muktzeh the kid's holding, the parent is not going to bend down if the kid drops it. But if he's holding money, so then it says in halacha, if he's holding money or something valuable, which is muktzeh, then you're not allowed to pick him up. Why? Because he might drop it, and then you're going to go pick it up, and then you're carrying muktzeh on Shabbos. In fact, the same thing says in halacha. Many poskim, many opinions hold, if a kid, let's say, is holding money and valuables in one hand that are muktzeh, and you're holding his other hand going for a walk, doesn't matter, in the house, out of the house, where you can carry, where you can't carry. The father, for the same reason, according to many, many opinions, you're not allowed to hold a child's hand who's holding money in that hand or in the other hand. Why? Again, because it's valuable. The kid might drop it. And if kid drops it, we're afraid you're going to go pick it. Okay? This is called tiltul kelachar yad. Kelachar yad means you're moving it with your hands, but indirectly. Okay, so we learned very simple, to recap the halacha very simply. If you're moving muktzeh indirectly with your hands, but indirectly, if it's for the sake of the muktzeh, you're not allowed to. If it's for the sake of the non-muktzeh, you would be allowed to. So we said if you have egg peels or pits or cherries, somebody's eating cherries, and they spit out the pits into a napkin, you're allowed to pick up the napkin with the pits in it and you throw it out. Why? Because you're not doing it, you're not picking it up for the sake of the pits. You're picking up because you want a clean table. So then you would be allowed to throw out the pits. But if you're moving it for the sake of the money or something valuable, let's say on the table you have a napkin that has something muktzeh valuable on it, and you want to pick it off the table to protect the muktzeh, then you wouldn't be allowed. Okay, that's one category. The other one is what's called tiltul begufay. What happens if you move it with your body, not with your hands at all? I'm not moving it with my hands. Until now, we learned you're moving it with the hands, but only indirectly because you're not touching the muktzeh directly. You're either moving it with a stick, that's not muktzeh, or you're picking it up. What happens if you don't move it with your hands? Am I allowed to kick something of muktzeh? Am I allowed to elbow, something of muktzeh? Or with my knee, with my foot, with my head, not in the normal way of doing it. For instance, can I move a wallet with my mouth? I left the wallet on the table. Okay, we learned it's completely muktzeh, right? You can't move it for any reason whatsoever. So now I want to move the muktzeh. I want to knock it off the table. So I want to knock it off the table. I can't do it with my hand. Okay, but can I do it with my elbow? Can I do it with my head? Can I bend down, put the wallet in my teeth, and with my teeth move it somewhere else? Then the halacha is you're allowed to. Then you're allowed to. Now, some poskim hold you shouldn't do it, but the Alter Rebbe is lenient, and the Alter Rebbe holds that tiltul begufay is allowed. Okay, that's what the Alter Rebbe holds, and we poskim definitely like the Alter Rebbe, and he's lenient, and he says even muktzeh gamur, even complete muktzeh, if you're moving it indirectly, meaning not with your hands, but you're moving it with other parts of your body. I'll give you another example. Somebody's walking in the street and they see a few $100 bills in the street. Now, obviously, you can't pick it up on Shabbos. Money is muktzeh. So what happens if you're in a place where you're allowed to carry, or even in a public domain or semi-private domain? You're allowed to carry up to 4 amis, which is 6 feet. So what happens technically if somebody walks in the street and they see money dropped off by the side of the sidewalk? You're allowed to take it, not Shabbos, you're allowed to take it because we assume the guy gave up hope right away. So now you find money, and you don't want, you can't pick it up and take it with you on Shabbos. So you want to kick it off to the side a little bit, say half a foot away, under something, let's say, and kick it there. And then hopefully after Shabbos, you'll come back and it'll still be there. Halachically, you would be allowed to do that because you're not moving it the normal way of Muktzeh. You're not even moving it indirectly with your hands. That you wouldn't be allowed to do. To take something, to take a hanger and move the money off to the side to protect the money, we just learned if you're moving it with your hands indirectly, for the sake of the muktzeh, you still wouldn't be allowed to. But if you're moving it with your foot, you're moving with your elbow, you're moving with your head, or something like that, so then you would be allowed to do it. Now, how about blowing muktzeh? Okay. Again, there are opinions that say you're not allowed to blow muktzeh on Shabbos. But the Alter Rebbe holds clearly you're allowed to blow muktzeh on Shabbos. You can kick it, you can elbow it. Sometimes somebody left something completely muktzeh on the table. And you need the space. Bottom line, what do? It's not Kli SheMelachto LeIsser that you can move if you need the place or something. You can't move it for any reason whatsoever. So how do you get it off the table? How do you get it off the floor? I mean, if it's in the way on the floor, how do you get rid of it? The halacha is, you can, according to the Alter Rebbe, you can take a different part of your body, not your hands, and you take your elbows and push it off the table. You could take your foot and kick it off the table. You could blow it off the table, because that the din of a muktzeh doesn't apply. Okay. Now, we said though, touching muktzeh, then you're allowed to. Okay. If you touch muktzeh, unless it's something like we said, an egg or a lamp hanging, then you wouldn't be allowed. Okay. Now, what happened if by mistake somebody picked up muktzeh? They picked it up. They shouldn't have, but they're holding it in the hand now. Do they have to drop it, or can they put it down where it belongs? So the din is like this. If it's something, again, that's Kli SheMelachto LeIsser, which means a vessel whose primary use is for something forbidden, like a pen, a hammer, whatever, screwdriver, things that you normally are used for forbidden things. That's not real muktzeh, because we learned you can move it if you need the place. You can move it if you want to use the object to do, you want to crack open a nut with the hammer, you're allowed to move the hammer. So everybody maintains in halacha that if you picked up a pen, let's say, or a hammer, you forgot. You didn't realize, you just picked it up. But you didn't pick it up because you need the place or you need to use something permissible with it. So what do? You have to drop it where you found it, where you picked it up? So the answer is no. By Kli SheMelachto LeIsser, because it's not real muktzeh, you're allowed to move it under certain circumstances. So all opinions say that if, let's say, somebody by mistake picked up a pen or a hammer, a screwdriver, something, whatever, that's Kli SheMelachto LeIsser. The din is, according to all opinions, basically, you're allowed to take it and move it where, once it's in your hand already, you can put it wherever you want. You're allowed to put it wherever you want it to be. What happens though if the object is completely muktzeh? It's completely muktzeh. It's a stone. It's money. It's something that is broken vessel. And I found it now, I picked it up by mistake. So here, there are two opinions in halacha. If you're allowed to, must you drop it right away? Or once it's in my hand already, I can move it wherever I want. So there's two opinions. The Alter Rebbe is more lenient. So it's more lenient that if once it's in your hand already, you can move it. But he says, if by dropping it won't be a loss of money, you should drop it right away. In other words, if you're holding something that's a cell phone, let's say, okay, you picked it up, you're holding it, and let's say it's Kli SheMelachto. It's not only Kli SheMelachto LeIsser, it's too expensive, or a very, very expensive camera. Now we learned it's not only muktzeh because it's primarily used for something forbidden. It's chsar kiss. You're not going to use it for anything else. It's too expensive. So by mistake, a guy picked up an expensive camera, and then he realized it's Shabbos. He's not allowed to hold it. Then by dropping it, you're going to break it. So now the Rebbe holds, because you're going to be losing money, if you drop it, you can carry it to where you need to. If it's not something that's going to, it's not something that you're going to ruin, by dropping it, so then it's better, to drop it. You don't. But again, the whole concept of Muktzeh, it says, if it's something which is completely Muktzeh, and you should, out Rebbe holds, it's better to be machmed, not to drop. To drop it. But if it's going to cause a loss of money, so then the Alter Rebbe says you could be lenient and rely on the other opinions that say that it's not, once it's in your hands already, you would be allowed to move it at all. Move it completely. Okay, so that's basically the practical dinim of what you're allowed to do as far as moving muktzeh. When you're allowed to move it if it's in your hand, when you're supposed to drop it if it's in your hand. And this din applies, by the way, whether I was holding it before Shabbos or not. I was holding something in my hand, a stone, let's say. And then I realized Shabbos came and I realized I'm still holding it in my hand. So then, according to Alter Rebbe, because it's completely muktzeh, if there's no loss of money, you should drop it where it is. Then you can kick it out of the way, by the way. But once it's in your hand, but other thing else, Kli SheMelachto LeIsser, or if there's going to be a loss of money, according to the Alter Rebbe, you're allowed to, once it's in your hand, you're allowed to move it to wherever you want to take it. Okay, let's go to Tanya, because we finished this aspect of Muktzeh. We're in the heavy-duty Perek Lamed Beis.
Rabbi?
Yes.
About if let's say there's an insect on the table, of your Shabbos table, could you blow it off the table?
A bug, an insect is Muktzeh. Animals are completely Muktzeh.
Right.
So yes, so we explained that if, let's say, there's a bug on the table, okay, you can either blow it off, you can move it off with your elbow, or something like that, or you can even take something that's not Muktzeh and move it indirectly with your hand. For that matter, you can even take the back of your hand and push it off the table, because that's indirect movement, and you're not moving it for the Muktzeh. You're moving it because you don't want the bug on the table. So you're moving it for the table. So then in that case, you would be allowed to blow a bug off the table, or move it with the back of your hand, or take a plate and just move it off the table. You have to be careful though. One last din that doesn't apply, it's not relevant to Muktzeh, but it's a din in this bug story. And that is, you're not allowed to capture a bug on Shabbos.
Right.
So you can't, let's say, push it off the table into a cup and then cover the cup until you take it out, because as soon as you cover the cup, you're capturing that bug, and capturing is another halacha called sad. You're not allowed to capture animals on Shabbos.
Thanks.
Okay, let's go to Tanya.